Hi, everybody. Welcome to the midweek message from Messiah Lutheran Church in Mechanicsville, Virginia. My name is Pastor Ryan Radke, and I'm really glad that you joined us today. We're going to continue our series on prayer. We call it Let's Pray Like This because that's exactly what it is. It's trying out different ways of praying and realizing that there isn't just one or not even just a handful of right ways to pray. There's many different kinds of prayer and spiritual practices, as there are many different kinds of people. God created us in this beautiful diversity, and just as diverse are the ways that we can pray to God. That kind of makes sense. This was inspired by this book. I finally unpacked the boxes. I finally remembered to bring it with me on the camera. It's called Soul Types. It's by Sandra Krebs Hirsch and Jane A.G. Keyes, and it's based on the Myers-Briggs personality type inventory. How this works is for each of these personality types on this system, the authors describe different ways that you kind of function in the world, the way you get your energy, the way you receive information, the way you express things, the way you relate to other people. And in this book, they have a whole bunch of different spiritual practices that kind of go along with each personality type. So out of that came this class, a sort of sampler platter of prayer. If you haven't tuned into these before, go way back to number 1 on our video page, and you'll see, hopefully there, a link to the sample, the miniature personality type survey inventory that you can do to just get started. Or you can go online and find other resources, I'm sure. But once you kind of find out your type and you kind of start exploring what might work for you, I think it will really enrich your prayer life in ways that maybe you haven't had a chance to experience before. At least that's the goal. Today we're going to have a twofer. I'm going to share 2 different types of prayer with you. The first one is a prayer journal. Seems self-explanatory, but we'll go into it. A prayer journal is like writing your prayers instead of thinking them or speaking them. It's a diary or a journal to God. It's like a place to collect all your random and scattered thoughts, prayers, worries, concerns, and joys. It's like having a constant confidant that you can tell anything to, a concrete, paper or electronic companion where you keep your notes to God. It becomes a record and an archive of your relationship with God. It's like a scrapbook to your maker. That's the cool part for me. Um, what's it for? It's for when you feel maybe a little disorganized. You want a way to inventory your prayers. Maybe you have a hard time remembering what you've already talked about. It's for when you just want to write a note to God. It's also for when maybe you like categories to put your thoughts and prayers into. Harkens back a little bit to structured prayer from the first week. Um, and that's one aspect or one way you can use this prayer journaling. But it's for making a record of your prayers, your worries, your joys, your thanksgivings that you can then revisit after a while, like that scrapbook, like an album, and remember what you had been praying about and think about how God maybe has answered those prayers since then. I think that's the best part of having this journal is it's an archive that you can go back to and reflect on and remember and go back and see how maybe God reacted and responded in the meantime. When can you use this type of prayer? Well, you can use it the same time every day, like right before bed, just to jot down the prayers that the day has inspired or start your day with it. You could use it throughout the day. You could have it with you on your device or have a little notebook or something, a little journal. And just write stuff in it as it comes to mind. This prayer journal functions for both those who like spontaneous prayer and for those who like the more structured prayer. Whenever you have the impulse to pray and you want to write it or type it, you can use it almost anytime. Where could you use it? Same kind of thing. You could use this wherever you have your journal with you, especially if it's on a device that you have anyway. There you go. It's right there. Uh, your journal could be a notebook, a tablet, a phone, a computer, any other thing you could put your words into. And you could use it wherever you feel like you are free to stop and jot down a few words or even a long letter. Here's how it works. You write stuff down. Pretty simple. You can be open-ended with what you write. You can use categories. Those categories could be the ones from structured prayer that we did in session number 1. like trip or acts. They could be basic, like things I pray for, pray. Or they could be more complicated, like where did I see God today? They could be one-time prayers or ongoing prayers. They could be highs and lows, just highs and lows at the end of the day. You could write them on paper. You could put it in a device. Um, you should write the date on each journal entry and maybe even a few words about what was going on in your life that day, just to put it in context. You could even put some doodles in there. You can go back and pray out loud what you've written or in your head. But journals work best when you use them regularly, once a day, once a week. Then, after a good chunk of time passes, you could go back and reread what you prayed about before and then think about how God has heard you, how God has answered those prayers. Um, this is probably a more solitary type of prayer, you writing things by yourself, but you can always share them with others later. Um, and myself, I've always had a hard time journaling. It's not something that comes naturally to me to write things down. I remember whatever stage of school I was in, if the teachers wanted me to write a journal, I'd kind of groan. Sometimes out loud, not always so discreetly. I'm like, oh, but it's really rewarding. And that archive piece, that going back on it piece is something I feel like I'm missing out on. But you can't force it. That's part of the whole point of this series is you do what works for you. And maybe there's other ways you can try to capture that. But I do know that the more complicated something is for me, the more apt I am to write it down. I brought a visual aid. Now, my family member recently told me he saw me writing something out on paper, and he said, I can't remember the last time that I saw somebody actually write it out and then type it. I do that with sermons a lot. Um, he works in IT, so maybe that's why. Maybe it's more techie folks. But I'm going to show you the notes that I was writing as we were planning returning to worship in person, trying to cover all the different pieces we'd already talked about, looking at the bishop's office and the governor's office and our insurance agency, and just all the little details of logistics on how to be in the building, how to fit the most number of people in there, and how to keep everybody safe and with these health guidelines. So it started off with just some notes at the top, but then it turned into a list. And as the list continued, I started writing things on the margin. I didn't want to start a new page. I wanted to keep it all right there. There's a sort of an organic feeling to when I'm writing it down. I can remember where on the page it was many days or weeks later. And my thoughts kind of flow with the paper as I'm going off on tangents. And then we had another meeting later on to go over sort of the draft and the review, and then there's more on the back. So this is maybe what your journal could look like. Maybe yours is a little nicer. I have really sloppy handwriting. But this is just an idea of one of the benefits of writing it out. Kind of lets things flow in a different way. You can do that on your tablet too. It still works on a computer. But that written one for me is what really works. Another family member likes to copy out passages of scripture and kind of almost calligraphy writing. Maybe that's something that could be part of your journal. Pair it with those daily devotions that we talked about the other week. There's lots of ways you could use this type of prayer. But I think the most important thing is, and kind of the goal that wanted to get across to you today, is that you know that prayers are not one and dones. That you're not just shooting your prayers up into God's consciousness and then you never think about them again. A journal is a visible sign of an ongoing relationship, an ongoing conversation, which is what prayer is all about. Just like relationships, prayers have context and history, and they change and grow over time. And having this journal is a way to see that concretely and refer to it and have it be a part of you. So I invite you to try it. Um, invite you to try it. Write down the date and a little bit about your life right now. Um, and then choose some of the questions and categories on the other page of the handout that will be attached with this. Some prompts, some ideas on how to structure it if you need that. And pick an amount of time, 7 days, a month. You set the time frame. But commit to writing regularly in your journal. Mark your calendar. Set a reminder for a couple of months out. So for that daily, or for however often, set the reminder, set that alarm, mark it on your calendar to make sure you do it every day, but then set another one for like 2 months later. go back and look at what you wrote down. If you kept writing, go back to the beginning. If you just tried it and said, maybe it's not for me, I still want you to set that reminder or mark it on your calendar and go back and look at it again, just so you get a chance to experience that archive, that record piece. And just ponder that. How has God been responding to your prayers? What's changed in your life since then? How has that prayer affected things? And have you been listening for the reply? Um, so that's the first one I wanted to share with you this week was the prayer journal. The other one, let's try praying like this, centering prayer. Now, I'm piggybacking these two because this one I can't really demonstrate. This one isn't one that I can really um, do for you or show you. This is really one you have to experience on your own, and it's called centering prayer. Maybe you've heard of it. What is centering prayer like? It's like giving your full and complete attention to God. It's removing as many distractions as possible, letting go of your own stuff. This type of prayer is much more about listening than talking. It's about letting God be at your center, even if only for a little while, and it's about letting God center you, especially in our full and busy lives, and especially during these crazy times. I know I've got extra people in my house who would normally be at school. It's kind of crazy. So imagine this gift of saying this Sabbath time, this commandment of God to put that time aside for God, even if it's just a little bit of time a day or every few days, to center yourself on God and be centered by God. That's what this is for. Um, it's for consciously and purposefully devoting yourself for a set period of time to God. Uh, and like I said, it's mostly for the listening side of the conversation, being receptive to God with as few distractions as possible. It's a concrete act of putting God first. So this one's a little trickier with the when and where. When could you use this? Well, you can use it any time of day, but you need to schedule it. This isn't so much a spontaneous thing. It involves some intention and some planning. You can use it whenever you have a decent chunk of time. I would recommend even 20 to 30 minutes. 10 to 15 could work, but 20 to 30 is better to devote to this type of prayer. You could use this wherever you can shut out the world for a chunk of time. Preferably, it'd be in a room that you could shut, with a window you could cover, the comfortable place to sit or lie down. That would be ideal. But maybe it's your lunch break. Maybe you sit in your car um, and just tune out the rest of the world. Wherever you can find that quiet place, that's the key. Um, Here's how it works. First, remove distractions. Shut the door, cover the windows, turn off screens, especially phones, other devices. Try to get as much other light out as you can. Second, get comfortable. It's 20 to 30 minutes and you're not supposed to move around, so sitting or lying down is best. Third, a candle is lit. The flame helps you focus and recenter if your mind wanders, and it might, very well could. If a candle's not an option for whatever reason, just some other small light. Um, just something to kind of bring your attention back to center yourself. Fourth, listen to a little bit of something to start your prayer time. Words is probably better. Could be from scripture, could be the words of a hymn or a scriptural reading. You don't want music. Again, you want as little distraction as possible, but just some words to kind of come back to. Not a long bunch, but like a phrase, a word, a centering thought to go along with that centering light of the candle. If you can't listen to something, just pick a word or a phrase to let that be kind of your centering thing. Maybe you've heard it called a mantra or something like that. That's from a different tradition, but kind of works the same. Um, if your mind wanders, that's your word. You say that word. You kind of use that to clear away those distractions and bring it back to the center. Fifth, be still. Just be still. That might be the hardest part if this isn't in your personality type. If your thoughts wander, use the candle. Use the words to come back and recenter. But just be still. I can't describe to you really what that feels like, and it might take the whole 20 minutes before you feel that kind of peace, but it comes. It's a rarity and a luxury even in the busy world, in the interrupty, phone-driven world that we have. I want you to try this. If you have somebody who could help you to kind of put you in the room and then be the timekeeper for you, they'll let you know when your time is done. Uh, Maybe 15 minutes if you've never done this before, just to ease into it. If you try it on your own, go ahead and set an alarm, but then hide that phone. Put the alarm out of sight. You don't want to be distracted. No peeking. No saying, oh, how much do I have left? No, it doesn't work that way. Be aware, we lead busy lives, and so this might be a tough one. And you know what? You might fall asleep, and if you do, that's okay. God must know that you need the rest. God won't take it personally, but it's a very real thing that could happen. The goal with this, again, is just to know that regular prayer is one way to make God your one and only priority and guide in life. It's not a once in a while or a once a week thing or when you think of it. It's this centering prayer that God is a part of your life, is the priority, is your Lord. This type of prayer, centering prayer in particular, strips away everything else and leaves only you and God. And again, a lot of it is about that listening. So on both of these, on all of these in the series, um, somehow let me know what you think. Let me know what works for you. It's exciting to have these conversations, to have these discoveries on prayer and opening up new avenues of prayer in your life. But that's what I have to share with you today. That was centering prayer, and it was prayer journaling. Another couple of approaches on our sampler platter of prayer. Thanks for watching. We'll have more for you next week. Keep taking care of each other. Keep praying for one another. And go ahead and try these out. We'll see you next time.